Hey everyone, Mike McClary here again with video number 2 of the Tariff Survival Series. I'm here with Kerim Kfuri, president, founder of the Atlas Network, speaker, podcast host, author, you name it, he does it. And he does it while he's traveling the world helping companies and brands take care of all of their logistics, manufacturing, and shipping concerns. Kerim, thank you for being here again.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. And as always, ready to dive in.
All right, so in our last video, we talked about the China Plus One strategy. And in this one, the question that I get all the time is what types of strategies or logistics, I guess tactics, can people be using right now in order to really have save money, save potential tariffs, everything like that. When they're keeping their business in China, they're kind of stuck, with either storing products over there, over here, shipping. What are the exact strategies that can have, like, maybe even using bonded warehouses? Not something I've done. I've heard people doing it. So I really want to get your input on what those real logistics and warehousing strategies can be.
Absolutely. So, what we're talking about here is we're talking about kind of more deferral of tariffs. And that's where you have a scenario of a U.S. bonded warehouse or even a free trade zone comes into play, where a client says, you know what, I need the goods to be stateside, but I just don't want to take on all those tariffs right up front. So I got to ship the goods. And when I get them here, I'll then sort of figure out how to deal with them, how I'm going to put them in the market, how I'm going to sell, how I'm going to distribute, and things of that nature. So you bring it into a place like a U.S. bonded warehouse where essentially you're not tariffed on the goods until you then bring them out of the warehouse. And so this allows you to sort of phase in the approach of how and when you're going to accommodate the tariffs. And this also gives you the freedom of being able to have your products stateside and not necessarily being at the mercy of them sitting in a warehouse overseas. So that's one option for sure. But it is a bit of a challenge. I think the other options that we talk about, or you may have talked about before, is about inventory and inventory management, and essentially kind of forward stocking, or looking at how you're going to pick up a certain amount of inventory, not just for the quarter that you're looking at now, but let's say the next quarter as well. So we saw a lot of this during these 90-day pause periods where businesses said, oh, we got this 90-day pause right now. Let's get 2 quarters worth of inventory over here quick, so they're not, being tariffed, or at least at the higher rates. And because it's a product that we use all the time or have been selling for years and years, it's worthwhile for us to take on this inventory, front load it, warehouse it domestically, and then be able to disseminate it into the market according to whatever sales plan or sales strategies we may have. But it's much more worthwhile for us to have it on hand rather than have us be in a scenario where we either don't have it anymore and customers get upset and we have an attrition rate, or are somehow paralyzed by them being on the other side of the planet. So this idea of inventory management is quite important. Now, we know that also inventory can kill businesses, so you can't go too far with that. You can't let the pendulum swing too far. So I would suggest in those scenarios that it's maybe a couple of months more than what you originally would have thought, or maybe a quarter additional or 2 quarters additional. But it's all based upon, again, your customer base and your past track record and history of sales to really determine where you think you're going to be, even though you front load, quite a bit.
One of the terms that I've used, I used to work as a consultant for some management companies. I know you did also back in the, I think, Accenture days also.
Right.
Turning over inventory was one of the metrics they were so proud of. How quickly can they turn it over? I'm assuming that a lot of big companies are facing the same thing, and that is no longer, they're not trying to keep it low if it puts their business and customers at risk anymore.
That's exactly right. Essentially, as long as you maintain the customer and you don't have a high level of attrition. I would say the real metric is attrition rate more than anything else, rather than inventory rates. Because think about it this way. What does the global supply chain ultimately do? Who does it service? It services the customers. And if the customers are either broken down, or they're not getting goods at a price that they need it at, or in a time frame that they need it at, then the entire supply chain becomes broken and disrupted. So it's better that the business takes on the liability for that gap period or that interim period, so long as the customer is happy. They're getting what they need when they want it. They're getting it at the same price, maybe even a better price, a discounted price. That could be another scenario. Let's say you front loaded some inventory and you create a buy one, get two, or some kind of a scenario where you can also move through inventory, but at the same time, keep the customer even more happy or more loyal. That then brings in more customers. So you can use these in smart strategies to continue to develop your markets. It doesn't always have to be something that's overly negative.
I hadn't thought about that. That's a great point, though, because, well, remember COVID, and certain things were almost impossible to get because they were always out of stock. And when you think about services like Amazon, who has subscribe and save, so many times I got the notification, this product is out of stock. Do you want to go in and
Right.
pick a different one? Of course, back then there was no different one to pick sometimes.
Right.
But if I have a brand that I'm buying that is consistently just always making sure that I get my product, the prices are solid, they don't have to be the cheapest, but they're consistent, that builds a lot of loyalty with me.
Sure. Sure, absolutely. And then again, back to this idea that, depending upon your profit margins or what you're doing, maybe you have programs like, again, if you front loaded inventory, you may say like buy one, get the second one half off. And you're still making money and you're moving through your inventory and you didn't have that tariff impact because you brought things in that 90-day pause or otherwise. So look, it really comes down to this concept of to be disruption proof. And that's the concept here more than anything else. What do businesses really need to do? They need to be nimble. They need to be agile. They need to be adaptable, and they need to be strategic. They need to be these things because global supply chain, or really any aspect of business, is going to have these ups and these downs, these controllable, these uncontrollable factors. And those that survive are the ones that are able to, bob and weave really in the boxing match and be able to come out on top because they were able to make those moves. And so once again, back to this idea of inventory, if you got too much inventory, figure out a way to make it work to your benefit. If you have too little inventory, figure out a way to make that work to your benefit, such as, good things come to those who wait, or scarcity then really drives up the demand, and every single, coin has two sides. And you have to be able to work through that and work through those challenges. And logistics and warehousing and those kinds of operational strategies are definitely places where businesses have to be very creative.
I love that. Turning a threat into an opportunity and really turning these things around. That's a great way of thinking of it. And then I'm going to use the term Roberto Duran. We need to be Roberto Duran when it comes to being a business. Be nimble, bob and weave. I love it.
That's right. Best boxing is done in the corner. You're stuck in the corner, and the only way out, you got to work it out, right?
That's right. I mean, what are your options? I mean, your competitors aren't just going to, give up and say, well, we're not going to do business until this craziness is done. They're figuring out ways to make their businesses work.
And well, there have been many, many businesses that don't, and they're the ones that aren't around anymore. And that's exactly the situation. The ones that say, hey, let's just like wait it out. I had one example, if you don't mind, I'll just tell it to you real quick as a story. But I did have a scenario just like this where I was in Asia. It was during the height of the sort of trade conflict. It was, a couple months ago where I think it was 150% or something of that nature. And I was talking with one very large athletic equipment manufacturer. And they said, our big, large scale counterpart overseas doesn't want us to ship out the goods for 3 months. They want it to just sit here. And I said to them, well, what are your terms and conditions? Well, we've always had good terms and conditions with them where we would ship out the goods and then get paid and so on and so forth. But they don't want to take on the tariffs and blah, 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 blah. I said, listen, it's very simple. Tell them you'll ship the goods. Tell them you won't ask for the remainder deposits for another, let's say, 2 or 3 months. Let them take on the tariffs, keep their consumers happy, sell the product so there's no attrition rate, and then you get paid later on. You've been working with them for 10 years. Who cares? You're just kicking the can down the street a little bit. Made a phone call to overseas. Everybody agreed to it, and they moved forward. So in the end, they just had to be creative around the inventory to make sure the customer was happy. It wasn't just sitting idle overseas. Nobody was really benefiting, and the transactions continue to roll forward. But everybody has to be adaptable. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
That's awesome. I love that story. That's such a great way of making this work no matter what the situation. And I always like to think of these things as when there's some kind of disruption or a hurdle you got to get past in the business, every time that comes up, it's a good thing because so many people are going to give up. So many brands, businesses will give up. And if you can get over that, then you've just left all of them behind you. And it's like
I
opportunity
mean,
to move quickly.
for us, we're a supply chain solutions company. We thrive when there are problems because we are there for a solution. We put on our fireman's coat every single day and we're like, all right, how are we going to put out these fires? How are we going to basically make an opportunity in the face of chaos or in the face of threat, as you mentioned it before? And that is absolutely the mentality you have to have, I think, in business and in life in general, right? We're going to have a lot of bumps in the road. And, if you're just going to kind of give up every single time you hit a bump in the road, it's going to be a real challenge. So,
absolutely. If this is too easy, then no one would need us anymore, right?
Right.
But that's not the way life and business is. I agree with you.
Right. That's right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kerim. That was just great advice on how to really be nimble, bob and weave, take advantage of whatever the hurdle is you have, turn it into some type of positive, and just keep moving forward and keeping those transactions going. Great advice, but we're not done yet. So next, I want to talk a little bit about negotiating with Chinese suppliers or any suppliers that you have. So stick around. In the next video, we're going to go deep into how you can actually negotiate fairly with your suppliers in order to make your business even stronger. All right, take care, and we'll be back in a moment.